Thank you, Brad, for having me on, or Professor Brad, I should say. Um, yeah, Brad, I've known each other since I think I was training with you 2011. Um, and you may not know this, but essentially that was my best year I've ever had. That was my third year going into university. That year I was fortunate I got my first All Canadian honors for football, for defensive back and returner. So thank you, Brad. So today I'm going to talk about periodization, programming, and planning. Essentially, is kind of how I do it, the system that I've created over the last few years. First off, so who am I? Who is Kris Robertson? So I'm not going to go into, I was born, Pickering, all these things. But I'm going to start. 2010 is kind of when this journey kind of started. So it kind of evolved out of I needed to figure out how I could make money, but I was able to keep my training load up. So I didn't want to be like at a desk job or something like that, working 8 to 12 hours a day and then have to go train. So my dad actually gave me that idea to why don't you start personal training. So I went and got my personal training certification. And then that's when I started training clients at the parks in the summer to pay and support for my training. All through this time I was in university, and it culminated with me actually being drafted 11th overall to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in the CFL. So that was a really awesome time in my life. But unfortunately, I actually tore my ACL during that time, and that kind of like hindered my career. So for the next couple years, from 2013 to 2015, I was kind of rehabbing, getting back. I went back to school, finished my degree, and then 2015 comes around, and I'm actually released from the Saskatchewan Roughriders. So I signed with Saskatchewan Roughriders. I was released, and then at this time, I was 24, and I was at a point in my life where I was like, do I want to continue chasing the football dream, or do I want to start a career? I actually chose the latter, so my S&C career actually began. So I started up, I opened up my own business, and I started training young youth athletes. From there, we fast forward a few months later, and I was actually hired by the Toronto Argos as an assistant, and that kind of really really jump-started my career. There for a year, and then in 2017, Rugby Canada called me, and I have been there ever since. And in that time, I've kind of evolved to the lead development S&C for the Ontario team. So we have an academy that spans across Ontario, Toronto, and Guelph. And as well as I work with our women's 15s as an S&C as well. And then lastly is like I still have my own business, so I'm the head coach at Kris Robertson Training. So the next thing I want to talk about is essentially a model versus a philosophy. I could be getting into a war of words, tomato, tomato. But a model to me, it just makes more sense for what we're going to talk about. And a philosophy, so people are like, what is your philosophy? I feel that it's very rigid. And it's something that, one set doesn't really change. Whereas a model it's continually evolving. And as you go along in this career, you're going to see that, your model or your philosophy, whatever you want to call it, is going to evolve. So that's kind of why I go with model. So I'm going to explain to you what my model is. I like to look at it in terms of a tree. So with a tree, you have your roots, you have your branches, then you have your leaves. Okay? The roots, that's what, that fosters the growth. And the roots are cemented in the ground, and they don't really change much. They do grow, but they don't ultimately change. So at the root of my system is health. The best ability is availability. Again, I'll say that again. The best ability is availability. If your athletes aren't healthy, I don't care what S&C program you have to keep them healthy. And then the next thing I want to do is, again, improve game day performance. So ultimately, working in team sports, what you want to do, keep them healthy, and you want them to perform on the day of the game. It doesn't matter how they perform in practice. It matters about the game. Okay? So then we move up the tree and we move to the branches. So with the branches, I like to think of it as it's called the 4 coactive model. So essentially, it encompasses the physical, the technical, the tactical, and the psychological. Okay, so everything that I do in the gym, I'm trying to build upon the physical, the technical, the tactical, and the psychological. So with regards to the physical, that is obvious. we want to get them bigger, faster, and stronger. Okay? With the technical, we want to be able to improve their physical abilities. That's going to help them perform certain techniques. So, for example, with regards to scrummaging, you need a certain adequate level of core strength to be able to hold yourself into a certain position. The tactical, when it comes down to game day decisions, that's something that we can improve on. And then the psychological, one thing I found working with athletes, youth athletes especially, is as you do improve their abilities in the gym, they get more confidence in their gameplay. So they're like, I can beat that player on the edge, or I can tackle that player, or whatever they're doing. Okay? And then lastly, the leaves. So the leaves, these are essentially the methods used to improve on the aspects of the 4 coactive model. So these things are always changing. So the method I used last year to get someone strong is not the method I'm going to use this year. So, but its overall arching theme is essentially the methods used to improve these the 4 coactive model. So this is the next thing we're going to go into is essentially reverse engineering rugby sevens, or you can say a needs analysis. So with the needs analysis, you have to look at the biomotor abilities, bioenergetics, and then the biodynamics of the sport. So with biomotor abilities, as you can see in this top left here, is essentially where does it fall in the speed, strength, and endurance continuum. Okay? With rugby sevens, we fall between the speed and endurance realm. Strength is important, as strength does underpin endurance and speed, but as we know, the strongest athletes aren't always the best athletes. The best athletes in the gym aren't always the best athletes on the field. So these 2 abilities are what we need to really improve upon with our athletes. So the bioenergetics, as you know, we got the 3 systems. Okay, you got the alactic, glycolytic, and the aerobic system. Team sports, rugby sevens especially, is a alactic aerobic sport. Okay, so what that means is an intermittent sport. So we essentially have high alactic outputs, followed up by periods of downtime of no activity or low activity. So again, you need to have a robust aerobic system to, again, replenish the ATP and to keep improving the alactic system. So something we'll talk about later, but essentially I like to call it is repeat alactic abilities. Okay, and then the biodynamics. Okay, what are they doing in the sport? And we've kind of broken it down to 5 different categories. So you got sprint, kick, tackle, ruck, catch, pass. Okay, that's kind of what they do in the sport. So what exercises can we do in the gym to improve these biodynamics? This is kind of how I think. So now, once we've reverse engineered the sport, now we're going to talk about in terms of like our athlete assessment. So with our athlete assessment, they first start off with a medical screening. So they have our athletic therapist as well as our team doctor that takes a look at the athlete. Okay, what are things that we need to improve upon in terms of from a structural standpoint? Are they moving right? And then that gives me a foundation for my S&C screening. And then lastly, we have a nutrition screening where we look for certain aspects, energy availability, also called RES, and eating behaviors. Okay, but for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to talk about everything S&C. So we're going to go into a little bit more detail with the screening. So with the screening, I look at it, I call it the Big 7. Okay, so we have our front squat, good morning, split squat, bench press, dumbbell shoulder press, external rotation, trap 3 raise. So with these exercises, some of these exercises are weight dependent. So there's a certain load that we want them to hit, and certain exercises are movement quality. So it's a 3-point scale. Did they do it right? Did they not do it right? Or are they somewhere in the middle? This is kind of how we look at it. So with the front squat, we like to see is about a 1.5 times body weight front squat is kind of our gold standard. And that's something that we'll see when they move on to like the national program or at the end of the 4 years with us. The next thing we look at is the good morning. You cannot do any quality S&C program if your athletes cannot do a good morning. That is just one of the biggest things that I believe, because hinging is required in every single movement that you want to do in the gym, on the field, right, in gameplay. So this is something that we assess, we constantly assess, and we build up their backs. The split squat is another exercise that I look for from a movement standpoint. So I like this exercise because it's a big bang for your buck. It's good for hips, ankles, and knees. Okay. Again, you want to improve triple extension. You want to improve speed. Having a good quality looking split squat will help increase stride length, which ultimately can increase speed. Okay. Then for the upper body assessments now, so we have our bench press. So with our bench press, we have our athletes, we want them to hit around 1.3 times body weight bench press. And that's kind of the gold standards. Not everyone gets there, obviously, but it's just a goal that we need to reach. And this is kind of what national and international play looks like. Okay. Then we go to our dumbbell shoulder press. So what I do is I'll take whatever their bench press is. So for argument's sake, let's say their bench press is 100 pounds. I take 29% of that, and they have to hold it in dumbbells, and they got to be able to do 6 to 8 reps seated shoulder press with the dumbbells. That just shows me an idea. Okay, if they can do this, that's an area we need to work on. External rotation, I use about 10% of the bench press, and they got to be able to do 6 to 8 reps of that. Good quality form. If they don't do that, then I know something we need to work on. And then lastly, we have the trap 3 raise. And the trap 3 raise I look at from a movement quality. Can they do it? Can they not? Or are they somewhere in the middle? And the trap 3 raise essentially, from a contact sport athlete, you need to have strong, healthy shoulders. And a trap 3 raise, when executed properly, teaches the athlete to essentially activate their lower traps, which are very important for keeping that shoulder healthy, keeping that shoulder in place in contact or anything else. So once we've done our assessment, we have our rugby IST. So basically how our rugby IST is, we have different pillars. So we have our tactical or administration, S&C, athletic therapy, and then other, which consists of nutrition and mental performance. So once we've done our assessments, we then have conversations with all these different pillars, and we come up with an ultimate plan. Okay. And then before we move on to putting more of it all together, I just want to talk about all our performance partners. So again, Rugby Canada being number one, that is who we work for. That is who we are representing, and that's what we want to all aspire to be and get to that national level. Okay. So we start here. We have our development academy. And with our development academy, we have in Ontario, we have academies spanning across Guelph, Toronto, and Ottawa. We also have an academy in BC, and we're working to build other academies around the country. So this is our feeder system to the national program. Okay. Then we have University of Toronto. This is where we actually do all our game plays. So we'll have our practices with the university. Then we have the Toronto Pan Am Center. There we do all our combat, all our indoor on basketball courts when the winter is here. Then Guelph University. So again, we've recreated what we have at the Toronto Academy in Guelph. So we do combat, S&C, as well as practice. And then On the Podium. So On the Podium is a very special partner, as they actually fund us. So they're part of like Sport Canada. And essentially what we need to do is we have to be sending report every year to On the Podium to show us our progress. And something that you have to take into consideration when working, at least in the high performance realm, is you have to be thinking 4 and 8 years ahead. So every time we're doing something, we're not thinking about the right now. We are thinking about right now, but we are thinking about the future. What's the next quad going to look like? How are we going to make our athletes better? We continually have to grow. Then we have Rugby Ontario. Rugby Ontario essentially governs, obviously, rugby in Ontario. And they're a very special partner with us. And then lastly, we have the Canadian Sport Institute, and that is where we get all our practitioners, mental performance, nutrition, S&C, athletic therapy. So now we talked about that. We're going to talk about kind of putting it all together. So once we've done our assessment, we've talked to our IST team. Now we're going to talk about our periodization, planning, and programming. So there's a distinction between the three, and I'll get into it. So periodization, essentially, it relates to the division of the training plan into discrete, repeatable phases that target the development of specific fitness characteristics. So strength, endurance, strength, power is the key characteristics that we're looking at. So if you see here, we have simply just a YTP, so a yearly training plan. Essentially just breaks it down into months. And then you have the weeks that happen here, and then it's just like there's anaerobic, aerobic, strength, speed. You can kind of have whatever you want here. You really just have to figure out what works for you. Okay. With regard to this, so electric power, I will explain in a few slides about the different categories I've put exercises in, or modalities I've put exercises in. Yeah, and then this is simply just the volume, practice 3 times a week. Next, we're going to talk about planning. So planning kind of digs down just a little bit deeper. So we know what's happening. Let's just talk about more detail, what's happening in those weeks. So if we start from left to right, we have the date, we have the competition. Okay, so the different competitions that they have, the importance. So, you know, is it high, medium, or low? And then here is just, this is a category for me. So this essentially, this will count up. So how many weeks we have. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, right? But then this week here will, this will count backwards. So basically I just know, okay, we're 3 weeks in, we're 17 weeks out from our ultimate peak date. So this gives me a general idea of where we are in our plan. The anaerobic, so you can see there's the different categories. I will talk about this. Next slide. Then we have our accumulation. So essentially, when it comes to weight training, there's 3 things that you're doing. You're either building muscle, activating that muscle, or learning to use that muscle. We're doing one of those 3 things throughout a calendar year. So as you can see, accumulation is higher volume. We're looking to build muscle. Intensification, we're learning to activate it neurally. Okay, and then learning to use it is just not on here, just because where we are in this part of the year, it's not important. Then we have our aerobic qualities. So again, next slide I'll talk about what each of those means. And then here is just in terms of what I feel is important to add into a program. It's something that I need to continually have an idea what's happening. So we have hamstrings. So hamstrings are a really funny thing. And it's something that you don't want. If any of you ever torn your hamstring or strained your hamstring, it's not fun. It's not a fun rehab. So hamstrings is something that we take pretty seriously in our program. So I kind of have categories in terms of proximal, distal, and integrated, and how I implement that. Then we have our jumps. So how many jumps are they doing per workout? Okay, just managing the contact time, and then you see we just progressively increase load as they build tolerance. Throws, so this is med ball throws. Then we have Olympic lifts. So as you can kind of see, there's no throws here, but we put Olympic lifts in. We put throws here. We took the Olympics out. So it's kind of doing the same thing that we want, and just kind of picking your poison, what you want to use, Olympic lifts or throws, up to you. And then this comes the number of lifts, number of sprints throughout the week, and then where are they getting their fitness? Okay. So are they getting it from practice, or are they going to get it from off-feet or additional fitness that I provide them? And for the most part, where our athletes are is they get their fitness from practice. So we've actually organized practice in such a way that they get their fitness levels up. Programming now. So programming essentially just relates to the selection of exercise variables that provide a training stimulus that elicit the desired adaptation. So muscle hypertrophy, metabolic, or neural adaptations. So the first thing we talk about is speed. In rugby sevens, we have the entire spectrum of speed. So I've broken it down to 4 different categories: acceleration 1, 2, max velocity 1, and 2. So we'll hit all these different distances throughout the year. In terms of strength, here I've broken it down into 5 different categories of strength. And for our sport, we tend to touch on strength, speed strength, explosive strength, and general strength. Max strength is something that we don't touch on too much just because essentially our sport is a power sport. So we need to be able to accelerate through people, or we need to run fast. Okay? Then we look at the energy system development, and in our sport, we do everything from alactic power to alactic capacity. So I'm just going to break down kind of some of this different categorizations I have. So alactic power essentially is maximal sprints or maximal efforts that are less than 6 seconds. We have repeat alactic power. So essentially these are maximal efforts with incomplete rest periods. This is kind of what we see as our sport. So that's the alactic aerobic component. Alactic capacity is our glycolytic run. So those are our long sprint intervals. Aerobic 1 and aerobic 2 are like our tempos. So yeah, for aerobic 1, essentially we have our MAS running, so maximal aerobic speed. And then we have for aerobic 2, that's our tempos. So for mostly what we do, we stay in the aerobic 2 zone when I do provide them fitness sessions. And we have aerobic power, which is our longer intervals, and our aerobic capacity, which is our longer steady state. Okay. And then lastly, if you look over here, we have our peaking index. So as you can see, it goes anywhere from 1 to 5 in just terms of where they are in terms of a fitness level. This is really important to provide to coaches just so they have an idea of what's happening throughout the year. So essentially, going back to our IST, we all want to be on the same page, and we're all working towards a common goal. And peaking them becomes really important because you could be doing something in the gym that has them at a level 5, where they're 6 to 8 weeks out, but they need to perform next week. So that's just poor communication on your part, the coach's part, and as an IST. So this is something that we constantly think about to make sure that we are all on the same page. Teamwork makes the dream work. Moving on to programming now. So these are just templates that I've created over the years. Again, it's a model. It's continually evolving and changing. But this is something I've been on for maybe the past 6 to 12 months. I've been pretty consistent with these templates, and I've been happy with what I'm seeing. So we start over here. This is my 2-day template. Essentially, we go upper, lower, a hamstring, upper pull, and then a single leg push. And then we have here, upper, lower again, single leg push, hinge, and upper pull. And this is my 3-day template. This is the one I kind of use for strength in the off season. And essentially, these are just the vectors, the types of speed that we're going to hit that day, the jumps, if we're going to do throws, and then sets for exercises. And then these are just the exercise categories that I continually use. Okay. And then lastly, we have my upper lower body split. So we have a strength day and a power day. And then we have strength day, and a power day. So again, these are just templates. These are just things that you can use to give you use as a guide to your programming. Next, we talk about sets and reps. Okay, so depending on the different type of quality that I'm trying to work on, I will use this prescription in terms of, so we have low volume, medium volume, high volume. High volume being the hardest to recover from. This is the optimal volume, and then this is considered low volume. So this chart is a combination of my own work as well as Prilepin's chart. So Prilepin, famous weightlifter from the Soviet Union, way back. And he just pretty much, they determined that they found an optimal number of reps to do, and your athlete will continually get better versus going down the well. And when I say going down the well, in terms of just not adapting. So with my program, we generally stay anywhere between, in these dynamic efforts, between, again, 30 and 75% is kind of that sweet spot that we stay in for majority of the year. We touch up here when we need to do testing. But I found that staying in this range, that 30 to 75%, is a lot of our athletes continually got faster, jumped further, and they were still gaining strength. Okay, And then in terms of bench press, accommodating resistance. So accommodating resistance is essentially bands, chains, cam levers, but you just generally use bands and chains. And then these are kind of the percentages you use, and go from there. And then special exercises, you can call them, I call them special exercises, because going back to the big seven, I'm trying to improve that big seven. So I call them special exercises because they improve that. You can call them assistant exercises as well. It's up to you. And then essentially for that, I have 1 to 3 sets, and that's anywhere from 1 to 25 reps. And I kind of just stay in that range. It's kind of just some general guidelines for what I do. So here's an example week. This is what we're currently doing right now. So we have a day that's heavier, and we have a day that's lighter. So a strength day, a power day, or you can say a max effort day or a dynamic effort day. So we have our bulletproofing. So again, here we're looking to improve their shoulder health, very important for rugby. And then we have our jumps. These are important, explosive power. And then here's the kind of meat and potatoes of the program. Okay, so these are the things that we're trying to improve. Okay, low back, leg strength, upper body strength. If we go here, we're looking at lower body power, upper body strength, and then we have our lower back exercises. And then these are our special exercises. So we have hamstrings, upper pull, and then we have our split squat. We want to improve our strength, mobility, and the health with our ankles, knees, and hips. So as you can see, in this program, there is similar exercises, but there's variation. So we're going to talk about next is essentially programming principles. So these are principles that I just abide by. These are kind of the rules in terms of if you want to get athletes better. So you have overload, variation, specificity, reversibility, and individualization. So overload is essentially, progressive overload. You continually have to do something. Are you going to change the load on the bar, the speed of the bar? Are you going to change the tempo? There's multiple different derivatives to catalysis overload. Then you have variation. So again, changing what you do from day to day, from week to week, from cycle to cycle. So that's very important. You don't want to do too much variation, as you will not get the adaptations that you want. And if you do too little variation, your athletes get stale. So you got to find that happy medium. Specificity. People think specificity and they think kind of like the sport, but going back to the biodynamics of the sport, okay, our 5 biodynamics. Essentially, you need to do the exercise. The exercise that you do is the one that you want to improve. So what I mean by this is, if you want to run fast, then run fast. If you want to lift heavy, then lift heavy. So don't think that by running fast or doing another exercise that you're gonna improve something else that's not specific to what it is. So you just need to understand that. It's a really good principle. Reversibility. Big thing you need to understand is any one quality that you do build, there is a reverse action of it. So if you build strength for 3 weeks, you go away from it for 3 weeks, you're going to lose some of that strain. So that's something that you need to take into consideration. A good starting point for this, with block periodization, you have glycerin, created some charts in terms of how long certain qualities last. Individualization. So with individualization, going back to my big 7, I kind of just put athletes in buckets. So does an athlete need to improve their hinging? Does an athlete need to improve their shoulder health? Do they need to improve their split squat? I put them in buckets, and you kind of give them more or less of certain things of what based off of what they need. That's an individualization of things. So my biggest take home from all of this is become a mad scientist. That's kind of how I like to think of myself. Is I'm continually thinking of new ways to get my athletes better. And a simple rule of thumb is I ask myself 2 questions. my athlete get hurt if I do this intervention? And if I say no, okay, cool. I go to the next question. The next question, is there a chance that my athlete could get 1% better if I do this? And I do it. So I've tried so many things. Okay? And in saying that, when you do try, one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite basketball players, Michael Jordan, he goes, "I missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed." I say the best teacher in life is experience. A lot of students, they graduate from school and they have all the knowledge in the book, but they lack the experience. And someone who may not know as much as you, they have better chances with an athlete or anything like that. You need to get your experiences. So doing internships, reaching out, talking to people. We live in an era where it's so easy to have access to S&C coaches, other people, mentors. So really and truly, you just really need to get yourself some experience, however that may be. So finally, I'm going to start talking about some of my influences in terms of like where I've pulled from. So what I generally like to do is I never take on someone's philosophy. I'm never going to, because this person does it, I'm going to do it. I'm obviously going to take it and then make it into my own unique way. And so I've taken tidbits of information from these three men in particular. So Louis Simmons, if you guys don't know who Louis Simmons is, I recommend you take yourself a month and go down that rabbit hole of reading all his articles, listen to his podcast. He talks a mile a minute, so you're going to have to probably listen to it a few times. But he's essentially like the godfather of strength. And the different strength qualities, I found like he's really good at attacking those. He knows how to train certain strength qualities to make really powerful, robust athletes. And it's culminated in him having some of the strongest men in the world. And this is for his sport of powerlifting. He's a really good example of how you take your sport and you train for it. Okay. Next is Cal Dietz. Cal Dietz works down at Minnesota. He's been there for, I don't know, some 20 some odd years. He's an inventor of triphasic training, a great resource. He puts out a lot of free resources on his YouTube page, on his Instagram, on his website, and he just loves to educate. He is, to me, is a definition of a mad scientist. He tries everything, and he writes about it, and he's very detailed, and he's open, and he talks about things that he's tried. And lastly, Charles Poliquin, the late, great Charles Poliquin. He's a bit controversial in some walks, but he's a Canadian strength coach out of Ottawa, and I use a lot of his work in terms of like my structural balance stuff, in terms of figuring out certain percentages and how to train and which direction to go in terms of training. And I use a lot of his exercises for my special exercises, simply because I've found the exercises with him is in terms of tempo. He likes to train to a full range of motion. It's kept my athletes really healthy and their joints feeling really good, really strong backs and shoulders, as well as hips and hamstrings. So it's just a good resource, and I recommend that you kind of look into all three of these men. And now in terms of books, I like to think these are the books that raised me. So the first book being The Science and Practice of Strength Training. This is a great book where it actually takes the physiology and ties it to the practical, and it shows how it's been used, especially with back in the Soviet system years ago. This is a book that I probably read this maybe 3 times a year, and every time I read it, I get something new out of it. And then we have the Ultimate MMA Conditioning, Joel Jamieson. If you're looking to train your athletes for any kind of fitness, this is the book. This is kind of how I've developed my system. He's put different qualities and how to train them. And he's created a great system, and it's something that I utilize to this day. Triphasic training, going back to one of my biggest influences in Cal Dietz. Those books written by Cal Dietz and Ben Peterson. There's actually a free book on the internet. If you type triphasic training, high school edition, like this will pop up, and it's a great book. It goes through sets, reps, how to implement triphasic training, and then some real life practical results. The system is a really, really robust book, but it shows how the Soviets did things and how they adapted it to for the American strength coach. So essentially, they use a lot of formulas and how they continually overload athletes over time. And this book really lays out how to build out a quadrennial plan. So a quadrennial plan being like, what's our plan year 1 to year 4, and how are we going to continually improve these athletes? So this is a really, really good book. And then lastly, we have the athletic-based strength training. So this is the tier system. This is where I've used this as the basis of a lot of the templates I use. So Joe Ken, he worked in American football. I want to say it was down in Arizona. Then he was working for the Carolina Panthers, and then ultimately now he's back into the private space. But this book, I would say, stands the test of time. And I think he wrote this in 2003. Strength coaches continuing to use this book and read this book. This has really helped me categorize my exercises in terms of what body parts and things that I want to hit that are important for my sport. So I definitely recommend any new strength coach is to read this book. And ultimately, that brings us to the end of my presentation. I want to thank you again. My email's here, my Twitter's here, my Instagram's here. I am an open book. I love talking, sets, reps, and everything like that. So again, thank you.